Praise the Lord and good morning. This is Pastor Charles Ferguson here in the name of Clare United Methodist Church. I represent as the senior pastor of Wesley Church of Hope and Clare United Methodist Churches, both on the south side of Columbus, and First United Methodist of South Bend. This is my honor and privilege to be with you on today. I know that we're doing this thing virtually, but I am glad to be able to share with you from the bounty of the gospel, especially as we come to the end of what is known as Black History Month. I want to thank Pastor Matt, who he has been a friend of mine since seminary, for calling me and giving me this opportunity to share with you on this platform. And knowing that different voices are needed, I'm glad that I can serve as a voice to bring about a different perspective and prayerfully a fresh perspective on what the gospel has to say to us. So on today, I want to share from the Word of God in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 2, verses 13 through 23. And out of the English Standard Version, it reads as follows. Now, when they had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Rise, take the child from his mother, and flee to Egypt and remain there until I tell you. For Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him." And he rose and took the child and his mother by night and departed to Egypt and remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what the Lord has spoken by the prophet, "Out of Egypt I called my son." Then Herod, when he saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, became furious. And he sent and killed all the male children in Bethlehem and in all that region that were 2 years old or under, according to the time that he had ascertained from the wise men. Then was fulfilled what was spoken by the prophet Jeremiah. A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping and loud lamentation, Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be comforted because they were no more. But when Herod died, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, saying, "Rise, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel. For those who sought the child's life are dead." And he rose and took the child and his mother and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning over Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. And being warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee. And he went and lived in a city called Nazareth, so that what was spoken by the prophets might be fulfilled, that he would be called a Nazarene. For a few moments, I want to share from the thought, resetting our value. Resetting our value. I must be honest. Many times I've gone over this text, many times I've gone over these notes, many times I've gone over the very nature of what it means to be in the text, so to speak. And I've come to a realization in this very moment as I share with you. It is difficult to live in a world where value placing exists. I would be lying to you if I told you that it is easy for me to stand in a pulpit every Sunday and not recognize the implications of what that means within a societal context. For you see, in the life of the church, there are certain things that make me who I am. One, my credentials. Number two, my calling. Number three, my personality. And when you pastor churches and congregations that look a lot like you, There is a comfort level in which you are able to share from very vulnerable places. It feels like home. It feels like being able to celebrate and or possibly commiserate all at the same time. Because the people around you understand what you go through. They understand the challenges you face, and therefore, what you have to say is of high value because 9 times out of 10, it is of similar journey. And while we are not together physically, I must share with you that even though I am not completely connected to the demographics of this particular congregation, it is possible that there are many of you that do not come from where I come from. Situations and circumstances that I have dealt with and perspectives that I face on a daily basis. So in sharing from this gospel and sharing from this story, I want to offer a perspective that may not be common, but you might find some common themes. Number one, when I read this text, I feel almost a significant amount of angst because it appears, at least, that when we read about Jesus, though being born, he is now the object of the ire of someone in a political position. Notice that there are people that are visiting from a totally different place who have read the prophecies of the prophets of old, who heard that there would be one who would be born, King of the Jews, that would be born in this area. And they saw his star from the east, and they were on their way to worship him. And when they were asking about where to go and identifying themselves and their business in the area, Herod, hearing about their mission, became disturbed because of this child that at least it sounded like he was coming for his throne. Interesting that Herod at best was a governor within an empire. He was not a king per se, but he was subject to the whims of the emperor of the Roman Empire. But he was to govern over this area, and he was the benefactor of what it meant to be a part of the empire, and he was living a good life. So why would he get nervous about a child that was born? Because he recognized that the birth of this child brought to the forefront the potential of disrupting his way of life and disrupting his privilege and disrupting his entitlement. This man was so nervous that on the spot he devised a scheme. He put it under the guise of worshiping said Christ child and told these wise men, go and find this boy, and when you find him, come back and let me know where he is so that I can come and worship him as well. God, knowing the ways of the hearts and minds of men and women, sent a messenger to Joseph to say, hey man, listen, it's time for y'all to move. After this encounter with the wise men, you need to go. And don't just go any old place. I need you to go to North Africa. I need you to go to Northeast Africa, to be specific. And even more specific, I need you to go to Egypt so that you can hide out there until all this stuff blows over. Because this man is out to try to get rid of Jesus. Joseph didn't ask any other questions, picked up everybody, picked up their stuff, and they went on about their business and went to Egypt. Strange that it may sound this way to some people, but how could you possibly hide out in Egypt if we take on this idea that Christ looked a certain way as it has been presented within the American concept? This would then suggest that the presentation of Jesus that has been promoted for many years has been a false equivalency, because there's no way that the Jesus that has been presented could ever hide out in a place like Northeast Africa. There's no way that there could be any blending in a place like that unless everyone was about the same or close enough. It is interesting that God would send the Christ to Africa, to Northeast Africa, to Egypt specifically, given all of its history and all of the history of those of the 42 generations of Jesus Christ, and somewhere in the mix, there being within a certain part of his lineage, the encounters that happen within that area. Not just Egypt specifically, but even in the land of Goshen, where it was the high flourishing area in which the Jews lived prior to their enslavement, and then even further before their liberation back to the promised land. So Herod was trying to find a child that blended in North Africa in order to eliminate him from the face of the earth, because he posed himself as a threat through prophecy, as being a threat to his positioning and privilege. After all that took place, after all the effort that Herod put in to try to find Jesus, his frustration boiled over, and he decided, rather than put any more effort into finding Jesus, that he would use his position and power to systematically destroy any of the potential that was 2 years or younger in the form of the male babies of that area, and commit legal genocide in order to try and stop the process of change that could be on the horizon. And yet, after putting all that effort into those things, Herod died. That angry, egomaniacal, egotistical, overly entitled individual died like any other person will eventually die. And then God sent that messenger back to North Africa and said to Joseph, now it's time to go back. Come on home so that we can get this thing moving. But even in the coming home, there had been death that had come upon innocent children. That death caused people and women and families everywhere not to be consoled. But Jesus was yet alive. And Joseph, knowing that he could have gone back to his original home in Galilee, recognized that Herod's son was still alive. And even though Herod's son now took on the role of governor in that area and took on the role of being in that positioning, though the messenger of heaven did not tell Joseph to do so, Joseph used discernment and said, we can't go back to where we feel comfortable. We got to go to a place where nobody would even attempt to look. And they moved to Nazareth, the place of the branch or the shoot. And from that place, the Christ would grow and become all that we know him to be by living his days in a place that would be the equivalency of what we might call here on the south side of Columbus, the hood. And we know the rest of the story. Imagine what it must feel like to have your entire life be subject to someone placing a value judgment on you before you ever reach your potential. Imagine what it must be like to be discounted and to be rejected before you ever have a chance to demonstrate your character before anyone. Imagine what it must be like to have people already look at you and suggest that you're not going to be much of anything because of what you look like and because of what God has promised over your life. Imagine people setting up systems and different things in order to keep you from behind and just to see if you can rise above every hurdle to even get anything remotely close to what has already been given to others. That's the life that many people of color live. That is the life that many black people experience on a daily basis. That is the experience that others try to explain away and others try to keep down as nothing more than just that's how you feel. But the reality is that everybody is looking at those of color as individuals that can make a difference and that enhance environments, but only to the degree by which people can profit the most. Because if we ever have anybody rise to a station of influence, all hell is going to break loose. Now, that may not be what everybody says out loud, but there are individuals that feel that way deep within their hearts. You don't have to be a conservative to feel that way. There are people that call themselves liberal that feel that way. Niebuhr, who was a great theologian, even at one time, though he was considered to be very liberal in many ways, but even when he was a pastor, he decided not to take the step forward to do anything about integration by suggesting that even though it should be done, there are those that look just like him that were not prepared for what it would mean to change the idea and the construct of the church by embracing those who are children of the Most High God. And even to the extent before he died, expressed how many times, though he was able to theorize and talk about the philosophy behind doing what is right, noting that he never took the risk of being prophetic and taking the steps towards doing those things that he believed. It does not make a difference whether or not you consider yourself to be one label or another. The fact of the matter is, we still have an entire group of people that look like me, that ask themselves daily, how in the world am I going to make it from day to day? Knowing that there are those that have all kinds of issues about my very presence even being in existence. They have value judged my life in such a way that if I'm tall, that if I'm big, that all I should become is an athlete, that all I should become is something else for their entertainment. And they don't recognize that I have the intelligence to be an engineer, that I have the ability to be a high-ranking officer in any level of politics, that I have the influence to be able to lead people regardless of race, creed, or color. I have the capacity to lead lives into better parts of what it means to be children of the Most High God, but yet because of value judgments placed by human beings that have forgotten what God has established about humanity, I still seem to be a threat. Brothers and sisters, black people in the United States of America have been trying to outlast the institutions of white supremacy, slavery, Jim Crow, messed up, bad political ideology, messed up voting laws, being called 3/5 of a human being as a man, and the non-existence of our women and children under the actual Constitution. We have been trying to outlast how people will continue to separate themselves in the lives of churches, how they continue to come up with cheap ideas of reconciliation without dismantling systems for over 400 years. And right now, it has come to the front door of every church, every institution, and every place because people are tired of being set according to a value system that is not set by God. And God has already set in motion for every human being that the value is only from heaven and not based upon the realities and the misnomers of human beings that refuse to let go of things that benefit them while keeping others under their foot and keeping their foot on their necks. It is not accidental that we've had another awakening in the life of civil rights and social justice. It is not accidental that people are speaking their minds about what they really feel, about what's happening around them on a regular basis. It is not an accident that every time you say the words Black Lives Matter, that people get unsettled. It is because the very nature of being present as a black man, as a black woman, as a person of color, it agitates the very nature of those who benefit the most because they think it is an implicit idea that should be accepted by all, but they continue to reject the notion that everybody does not embrace what it means to be created in the imago Dei, the image and likeness of God. I believe with all my heart that there are those in this world who claim to love Jesus, to claim that they love the Lord, that if Jesus showed up as he's described in the Bible, that they would reject him on sight because there's no way that that kind of love could come outside of that kind of package. I believe it with all my heart that people will still chase down Jesus because he is a total disruptor to the status quo of what's been established for years. I believe that it's not accidental that this story exists before our eyes because we always talk about Jesus' life threatened as a grown man, but we forget that it was as a child before he could even talk that he was hunted down because his presence brought about something different to a broken environment. I want the dismissed, the discounted, the rejected, the hated to understand that Jesus knows what you've dealt with. And I want those who have participated in the rejecting and the dismissal and the discounting to understand that your evaluation of my value or your evaluation of my worth cannot even begin to match the standard and the value that God has set. That no matter how many times you attempt to bring things down and to cast them off to the side, God has already established that my worth is above whatever human ideas may consider. Let me prove the point about how to recognize the appraisal value that God has set for the dismissed and the discounted. Number one, you got to understand that the dismissed and the discounted, they prosper in all conditions. The dismissed prospers in all conditions. Jesus wasn't even talking. His life was in the hands of a surrogate named Joseph. And Joseph had to have the kind of relationship with God where he was able to know the voice of the messengers that would come in order to move in such a way to preserve the life of his wife Mary and the child that he has been given charge over. So even though they had to run away initially, Joseph had to have enough good sense to make sure to move when God said move. And when God said move to Egypt. Joseph doesn't question where to go. If you read the text, there's no questioning by Joseph about where to go and who to be around. God made sure that Joseph took them to a place where they would feel right at home. Understand, they moved to a place where God made sure they would feel right at home. I'm going to say that one more time. God made sure that Joseph moved them to a place where they would feel right at home. They would not have to lose any time bonding as a family. They would not have to lose any time coming together as a unit. But he made sure that they moved to a place where they would feel at home and prosper. And even after being away from their original home, they not only prospered in Egypt, but they were able to come back and find a place to yet prosper again. They were a nomadic people, not necessarily by choice, but by condition and circumstance. Read your history. And I'm not talking about what other people try to write in dictating, but read the real history of what it is to be black. Understand that black history did not begin with enslavement in the 1600s over in these Americas and over in the Caribbean. But understand that the pride that black people have reaches all the way back to the places of Africa. Western Africa, where the slave trade happened. Northern Africa, where you had Egyptian pharaohs and such. Over into Eastern Africa, where you had all types of scientists and philosophers, where the great reservoirs of knowledge actually were birthed in that great continent, where you had resources beyond measure, where tribes rose to places of prominence, where they were able to defend themselves at all costs. I am not subject to just those who were brought over to be slaves. I am an individual that comes from a people that not only prospered in a land where they were birthed and where they rose from, but I come from a people that regardless of situation and circumstance have learned how to move through all types of issues, troubles, and trials to be able to prosper even in a land that was not theirs, in the midst of a system that was not meant for them in order to be what we ought to be. Read the history. The reason why Black Wall Street was so successful was because they knew how to make it happen. But the reason that Tulsa, Oklahoma was bombed the way that it was and was taken out was because of individuals that were worried about the world turning on its head in the early 1900s. Understand that no matter where we go, we find a way to work it out. Have you ever been around a person that has ever been able to come up with a million ways to fix every type and every part of the pig? That is creativity. Have you ever been around people that found a way to take little and become much? That is creativity. No matter what you see, those that are discounted and rejected, that have the hand of God on them, will prosper in every condition. Just because I am placed in a position that I don't want to be does not mean that God will not allow me to prosper in spite of it. Jesus wasn't going to die, not this soon, because the hand of God was on him and something had to be fulfilled. No matter what you do to the chosen of God, even if you reject them, the Bible is clear that no weapon formed against them shall prosper. Everything that Herod tried, it didn't work. And he tried it so many times, it eventually led to him still being in the grave. The dismissed who are called by God, they will always prosper in every condition. But number two, there's a reality of the dismissed. The dismissed, when they understand their value, when you understand their value, the dismissed will face unprovoked attacks from the entitled. Check this out. Jesus said nothing, but he was attacked. When he wasn't found, 2-year-old boys were attacked and killed. They didn't say nothing. They suffered because of the ego and the anger of Herod. Have you ever paid attention to how some of these things have been set up? There are people suffering right now because of the arrogance and the instability of people who refuse to espouse equality and equity to all. A lot of people say that they want to see equality happen for all people. But the truth of the matter is, if we base it upon how the system is set up, there's enough equality across the board. The problem is there's not enough equity to make up the difference. You see, I stand as a man who currently has 4 degrees. I have a bachelor's, 2 masters, and a doctorate. But if I went into certain environments and all of my qualifications came to the forefront, and I went up for the same job as another who did not have the same qualifications, who did not have the same experience, but I get overlooked. The reality is that somebody would say that I was overqualified for the job. But the truth of the matter is, it might not have been that I was overqualified for the job, and it might not have been that I did a poor job in the interview. But they had to find a way to make sure that they advanced somebody, even if it meant taking things at a discount. Okay, that might have rubbed you the wrong way. And if it did, I do not apologize. But allow me to bring up something else. Can you imagine what it must be like to deal with a wealth gap where black men are already about 24 cents behind their white counterpart? Where a black woman is already about 35 cents behind their white counterpart? Even if they have the same credentials, the same everything, and yet they're not being compensated on the same level. There's equality because everybody can get the same job. Everybody has the opportunity to get the same job. But equity comes up when the pay scale is different. Understand that there are people that will constantly provoke because they do not want to give up the comfort that they have felt. And they will find ways to remain comfortable while thinking they're appeasing others by letting them just come in the space. But they don't want them to come in the space believing that they can do more than, quote unquote, their station allows. And understand this, you have to be some kind of crazy, some kind of maniacal, going back to the text, to not only not get rid of the one object of your ire, but then decide that suddenly, because you can't get rid of that one, you're going to try to get rid of anything that looks like them. Unprovoked. Walking while black, but getting stopped by the police when you have nothing in your hands, but you decide to just take a walk, unprovoked. When you get stopped and suddenly you're questioned as if you're a drug dealer, but you have nothing but a baby seat in your back seat. And it is evident by everything that is not in the car that there's nothing being trafficked. Unprovoked. When people tell you that you're not going to succeed because you have a speech impediment, and they think that all you will ever be is a special ed case at best. Unprovoked. When people try to measure you according to a standard that doesn't even look like you, and you exceed all expectations, but you still don't get the recognition you deserve. Unprovoked. There are a lot of Herods in the world concerned about their little bit of something. But because of their own entitlements, they will find ways to provoke until they can find a way to justify moving them off the face of the earth. Herod would not put that kind of effort in if he did not know that Jesus really had that value. People that are just like Herod would not give that kind of energy unless they knew for a fact that God had placed great value on their life. And yet they try to find ways to literally fight God by rejecting that which was created in the image and likeness of the Creator. But the last thing I want you to understand is that recognizing the appraisal value of the dismissed and rejected looks like this. The dismissed will make their greatest impact from the branch. Let me help you. Nazareth in the original language means shoot or branch. So Joseph moves Jesus and Mary to Nazareth. They don't just go back to Galilee where they can hang out. No, Joseph decides to move them to the hood. Prove your point that it's the hood. The hood, can anything good come out of Nazareth? That was not just a saying that you read once or twice in the Bible. It's something that was said commonly among many. Suddenly, Jesus was now grafted into the part of the Israeli plant known as Nazareth. And God decides to prune that branch so that growth would happen. Hear me. Some of you might be interested in botany, and you have plants in your house, and you may have plants in a garden, and even with all the cold that has happened, I pray that those plants have not suffered in any way if they're outside or whatever. But if you pay attention to how you got to work your gardens and work your plants, at some point you got to go through and do some pruning. Because when you do the pruning, what you're doing is you're cutting off the dead, unproductive things in order that the plant might regain vitality to produce new growth. To get the dead stuff off so that new growth can happen. Jesus was now in Nazareth, a place that seemed like it wasn't pruned much socially, where people just got thrown away and thrown into the same kind of bunker of being forgotten. That even though Nazareth was not a place that people would obviously think that greatness would come from, God was going to use this branch and prune it so that the Savior could grow. And in the cover of the hood, Jesus grew in stature, grew as a young man, grew to be able to debate in the temple, grew spiritually, grew intellectually, grew in all forms and all ideas and concepts. That even as a grown man, when they thought that he was nothing but garbage, because they began talking about him around his mama and his stepdaddy, saying, of course, that ain't his daddy, that ain't who he comes from, talking about his mama in front of his face. He was pruned so that he could deal with the unprovoked attacks of even those that looked like him, those that had become conditioned by the empire, and yet and still he was able to teach with proficiency. He was able to disrupt the way that people functioned in the synagogue. He was able to cause people to reconsider how they worshiped in the temple. He was able to cause people to rethink about what it means to have free health care by healing the sick, raising the dead, and giving sight to the blind. He was able to do all types of things to recondition the thoughts of individuals that rich did not mean best, but it meant that you had ability. And he reconditioned people's thoughts about what it meant to be an influence within the world, not to just live off of ideas and off of philosophy, but to have real encounters with God. And when he did all those things, he became a threat, not to the government, but a threat to those that had caused themselves to allow religion to come in alignment with empire thought. They had to get rid of him. They had to find a way to kill him. They had to find a way to get him off the face of the earth. They convinced the government to get in cahoots with them, come up with charges that were not sustainable, but because they could get things done the way they wanted to. Went through one court and they moved it on. Went through another court and they tried to acquit him, but the crowd wouldn't allow it. And they caused that man to die for charges that could not stick. He died because they wanted him to die. He died, though, because he knew it was the thing that he had to do. He went all the way to Calvary and died on a cross for a reason that he didn't commit. He died in our place because that was the only way to open the door and prune the messed up nature of humanity, that we had a chance to restart all this stuff. And with a government seal, they took his dead body, put it in a tomb, sealed it with a Roman seal, and said it was all over and there was nothing more powerful than the Roman government. But on Sunday morning, he got up, caused Roman soldiers to go down like dead men, and he walked out, proving that nothing on earth could hold him back. And he rose. The rejected Son of Nazareth rose as the risen, powerful Christ with all power in his hand, proving to me that even when you reject me, I come back stronger. That even when you discount me, I will rise again. That even if you bury me under all types of issues, I will not fail to complete what God has worked in me, because the one who was faithful to begin it in me is faithful to complete it. Be careful of who you dismiss and discount, because they are absolutely necessary to the enhancement of your life. Be careful of how you reject what may be going on in places other than yours, because they are indicators in how you must conduct yourself in order to embrace what may be on the way. Don't just listen for the voices. Don't just listen to the voices. Recognize that there's great value in that which you may have never encountered before. That it will not only make you better as a human being, but will cause your community to be stronger and a greater beacon of light and witness in faith. We thank God for this time and pray that God will open minds, hearts, and souls to knowing the true value that God has sent and God has set, that we might be the people of God that we are called to be. Amen. of our why. Got to recognize the power of our why. Power. Power is usually associated with having energy, strength, voltage, ability to cause a thing to work. Like in order for these two lights that shine very close to me, in order for them to work, it's not enough to just turn on the power switch. And it's not even enough to just plug the lights into an outlet. You got to make sure that the outlet is working and that it's connected in such a way that it allows for us to experience illumination. The very nature of power allows for us on many levels to consider how strong a thing can be. When I used to play football, it was the first time I really went through a weight training program, and I began to realize which areas of my being were strongest. And I realized that I placed a lot of emphasis on my legs because, even though I would lift with my hands and be able to do all this stuff, and I could lift a decent amount, my legs were going to give me the ability to drive and push through and make all kind of moves as an offensive defensive lineman. And I remember at one point, I found myself on a leg press, and at my best, when I was consistent, I think at one point I strapped up enough weight, and on one session, I leg pressed like 600 pounds. And I looked up and I was just like, I can't believe I'm able to do this. And what got deeper with it was the fact that I looked up and I was doing it with ease, realizing that the consistency of just putting it out there allowed me to be able to accomplish some unusual feats of strength. Compelled my coaches to consider what my performance might be like on the field, considered for a minute that I might have a chance to do some great things as a player. Power has the ability to compel us to consider how things can be different and how things can change. It also compels people to consider how fragile that their life might be because something stronger has come along. Imagine realizing that something better has come along, something stronger has come along, something more powerful has come along, and you begin to look at your inadequacies. And then you try to find out ways to move and compel people to do something different, to act differently, to function differently, to do whatever it takes, that it won't mess with your status quo. Because the power behind that thing has troubled you so much that you no longer even believe in yourself and believe in your ability to go forward. Power is a funny thing. I said in earlier sermons that Jesus' presence shifted a culture, and it was so prevalent and powerful that it just disrupted everything. And this is the time where we begin to understand that disruption. For this is the account where Jesus is not just on the scene now, but Jesus is prevalent on the scene. And it appears, if nothing else, that by the time these wise men came that we read about in Matthew 2, it is said and it's believed that they may have come around when Jesus was basically either a year or 2 years older. His birth has happened. He is now a little toddler. These wise men have come from the east and they saw the star in the sky and they
saw that that star was resting on a place where Jesus was living with his parents. And they began to inquire about what they had read in ancient scrolls about the one who would be born King of the Jews, and that his star has marked the fact that he was present, and they wanted to take time to encounter him. Word gets back to Herod that the one born King of the Jews was now around. And so Herod was saying to himself, I just want to know where he is, but not because he had intentions on worshiping Jesus as well, but because he wanted to eliminate any potential disruption to his place. It makes me think about the idea that many black men and women face when we raise the question, at what point do I become a threat? At what point am I now threatening? Is it when I'm born, when I get a little older, or when I'm grown? Interestingly enough, Jesus was a threat as a child. So much so that Herod was already trying to form within his mind a way to eliminate this boy from the face of the earth. Oh, you didn't think that just the crucifixion of Jesus was the only time that his life was threatened. We see that throughout his life, many people wanted nothing to do with him. Many people were trying to find ways to eliminate him before the cross ever even came. Jesus' existence and his words and everything that he did and everything he represented was the bane of the existence of those who loved the status quo, those who loved supremacist ideology, those who loved to be in places that only benefited them. And it's interesting that all Jesus had to do was show up. That's how powerful and transformative his existence is. Sometimes we have to be reminded about how powerful Christ really is. We got to remember that it doesn't take much to compel the entire environment to shift, because Jesus is just who he is. Think about what was drawn. Think about what came. Think about what arrived. Wise men came from the east, people that were not necessarily associated with Judaism, people that read for the purposes of understanding cultures around them, people that wanted to know what could be on the horizon. They came from a place that was detached from the promise of the one who was to come. And yet they read of this person and they were so compelled that they had to travel to see this child that they read about, just to see if the prophecy was true, just to see if him being who he was real. And they traveled just to sit and worship Jesus in his infancy. What a beautiful view, even for us, about what it means to have a gift and a call and a purpose that even in its infancy, when people even get a hint of how powerful it is, and that is heaven sent, and that it comes from God, the power that's behind that. People that recognize that it's not even in its full potential, but recognize how it can impact the world when it finally reaches its point of maturity. That's the beauty of what Christ offers us. That's the power of who Christ is to us. In this season of our lives, we have to begin to recognize all over again how powerful Christ really is, what Christ does by being present, what our why does to compel great things forward. When I think about the power of God, I think about a few things that power does for us. And with this, I finish the year. What does the power of God do for us? Number one, it draws wisdom. From the east came 3 men who were intrigued by the prospect of what it means to have God within the earth. And they came with a desire to seek out the promise and the fulfillment of the prophetic and of heaven within the earth. And as they came with hearts ready to search, to understand, and to draw the conclusion that God fulfilled everything that was promised. But we call them wise men. They were so wise, in fact, that even after they encountered Herod, even after they asked for the ability to look and have provision, even after Herod attempted to catch them in a position where they would be sent out to be used for his device to draw attention and to be able to identify where Jesus was for his potential demise, God spoke into their ears, gave them discernment to know that they should not go back, because if they gave information about where Jesus was, that not only would Herod go after Jesus, but Herod would get rid of them as well. God compelled them to discern the situation, and they were able to move from going back to fulfilling a task to finding a way to yet live to tell the story. The power of God has a way of compelling us not just to be different in our approach, but to walk in wisdom and understanding, to arrive at a place where we are constantly seeking out new ways and new understanding on how to commit ourselves to the things that God desires to be done. We cannot continue to move on in the rest of this year into 2021 with an expectation of not seeking wisdom on how we approach the things of life. When we have God resting in our lives and moving in our lives, we are, in essence, finding our way and our path to making certain that we are doing things in step and in order with the will of God. Wisdom is not just having philosophical understanding. Wisdom is the practical application of knowledge and discernment in action. It is having the ability to know that when I encounter God, that there's always something on the horizon attempting to disrupt that encounter and shift the focus away from God into fear of that which tries to stop my growth and development in God. If those wise men did not heed the voice of God, they would have been sucked into a plot that would have ultimately cost them their lives. As we move into a new year, we need to become men and women of God that seek wisdom daily. That when we encounter God, that the power of God compels wisdom to help us not only discern our situation, but allow us to understand in a better way how to execute in all circumstances. We do not always have to wait on a manifestation. Sometimes it is the moment when we must move. But we must make sure that the power of God that compels us to go is always present to draw what we need so that we may function not out of ourself and not out of our will, but to function out of a deep desire to walk in wisdom and in understanding, and even more so in nuance of the circumstances that are presented in our lives. But the power of God not only draws wisdom, but it establishes authority. It establishes authority. Here is the funny thing about this story. Some people always talk about power, but they never talk about authority enough. Look at what happens. 3 wise men come from the east, and they come and they move west, and they come to Israel. They come seeing a star that is set in a place that identifies where Jesus is. They come on their way searching for the Christ child, and they talk to those within the government saying, we're looking for the one, watch, who is born King of the Jews. That is different than being appointed King of the Jews. Herod was King of the Jews by appointment of Rome. But the one they're searching for is born King of the Jews, as in he is in the bloodline of said kings of the past, particularly in the line of David, of which God promised David that there would be no end to his reign, that there would not fail to be one that comes from the line of David that would rule in Israel. Even though the rule was now under an empire, the fulfillment of said promise was made manifest in Jesus. And they were not searching for Herod, the one appointed King of the Jews. They were looking for the one who was born King of the Jews, the one that was legitimate according to bloodline. Herod was in such a flux that he did not have confidence in his own appointed authority. He was appointed King of the Jews, but he became nervous and insecure because of one who was born King of the Jews. He was so insecure and so uptight and so despondent that he went around and tried to find ways to eliminate a child. It's much like an adult getting jealous at how much stuff a kid gets at his own birthday party. What kind of sense does that make? Most of the stuff that kids get, none of us would use anyway. But yet there are actual human beings that are older than children that get jealous at how much attention and how much light is shown on them. And in the same manner, here's a person so insecure that he did not give credence to the fact that he is in the position and ultimately, according to the law, has the authority as appointed King of the Jews, governor over the area. He has the juice. He was so insecure that he put out a hit on a 2-year-old kid. Nothing's changed. 2020 has proven that. You still have people that are in positions that have authority attached to them, but they are so nervous in those spaces that they don't understand how to use it. They don't recognize that they have the ability to function differently if they choose, but they are so insecure that they cannot handle at the core what it takes to function completely. Jesus' arrival and Jesus' presence demonstrates what authority really looks like. Some people believe that you have to constantly tell them who you are. And the truth is, when you really function out of a place of power and authority, nothing has to be said. All you have to do is actually walk in it. The fact that Herod could not walk in it and was nervous by the presence of a child suggests that everything he thought was authority was frail, which means that if that was frail and he was a grown man, what makes you think that when you look at how things are when it comes to serving God, why should you ever in life give any attention to anybody or anything that demonstrates that kind of frailty? You worry yourself too much about what other people think and what other people say. They talk so much because they want to do everything in their power to diminish you. But I come today to remind you that the power of God active in your life is trying to remind you that real authority is not loud. True authority is not boisterous. True authority is not in a different place, but true authority in its complete understanding is about functioning on the level. The power of God draws wisdom forward. It compels it to come forward. The power of God establishes authority. But the power of God fulfills our joy. Imagine what it must have been like for those three brothers to show up. And they found out where the Lord was. And they see Jesus for themselves. They see the fulfillment of everything they ever read. And it says they came with gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And they spent time in that place with Mary and Joseph and with the Christ child. And Mary heard the things that they thought about her firstborn. Imagine what it must have been like to see that manifestation. There's no way that you could go into that place and not have a sense of fulfillment. I imagine, like anybody else, when you see a baby that's born or you see a little kid, if you're like me, something about kids makes you smile. When they're running around, their innocence, and we're recording them all the time and they're doing insane things. On the one hand, it's like it's hilarious because it ain't our kid. But on the other side of it, it's like it's still hilarious because it just might be our kid. Imagine what it was like to see Jesus either walking or crawling or whatever, and he's just there, and he is the personification of power from heaven. But everything about his being was as innocent and as pure as it could get. How could you not feel that kind of joy? Can I ask you, what does it feel like every time you encounter God in a real way? I don't know about anybody else, but when I really encounter the Lord, even in my struggles and all that stuff, there's something on the other side that brings about a certain level of joy. There's a purity in experiencing Christ in the simplest of ways. I think that at the end of a year like this, joy is still needed. I think the psalm writer is right. That even when we've gone through all this stuff and we have already said our stuff, have mercy upon me, O God, according to thy loving kindness, according to the abundance of thy tender mercies, blot out my transgressions. When we look at ourselves and we examine ourselves and we say, against thee and thee only have I sinned. Create in me a clean heart, renew a right spirit within me. Cast me not away from your presence and don't take your spirit from me, but restore to me, here it is, the joy of my salvation. Sometimes we have to go back and ask ourselves, have we asked the Lord to restore our joy? Have we said to ourselves, can we have the encounter again where on the other side of it is not just crying desperately to get through, but that somehow, some way, God, that you just restore the joy? Life is hard enough. But I promise you, when you and I encounter the power of God, God's power literally draws for us the opportunity to experience the joy. A joy that we cannot allow anything to disrupt. A joy that allows us to walk away from Herod and to go away knowing that our encounter has been kept intact. A joy that says that no matter what the world is assigned to do, that on the other side of that, we're able to know that we have joy in knowing that this is not the end of the story, that trouble doesn't last forever, that struggle is not going to be our lot, and that one day we will overcome and we will experience in totality victory. As this year comes to an end, I know there's been much hurt. I know there has been much pain. I know that there has been much suffering. But let me testify to this. I still believe in the power of the Almighty that is able to get me through a 2020 like this. I make no pronouncements about what 2021 will be. But what I will tell you is that whatever God is up to, I have hope that he'll increase my wisdom. I have hope that he will establish my authority as a follower and as a kingdom citizen. And I have hope that my joy is going to be restored. I have the hope that I'll be able to sing and shout like the songwriter, life now is sweet and my joy is complete. Remember your why. Remember why you need the Lord. Remember why you need the Lord. Remember why you want the Lord to walk with you. Make room for your why. Make room for Christ to dwell and take you higher. But most of all, don't forget the power of your why. Don't forget the power of Christ in your life. May the Lord bless you real good, is my prayer. You may be on with us today, and you have come to this point in the year, and you have said to yourself, something's got to give, something's got to change. The first change you can make is making a commitment to Christ. The Bible says that Jesus came and was sent to save that which was lost. Your chance is here to be redeemed and experience life-changing moment, to be totally transformed in becoming all that God intends for you to become. You may not have made a confession of faith, but this is your time and opportunity. Be compelled by the word. Be compelled by your experience. Go online, claireumc.com, wesleychurchofhope.org. Go to the member tabs. Declare your commitment to serving the Lord. If you have never been baptized, let us know so that we can set up the opportunity for you to demonstrate your commitment to following after the ways of Christ. If you have been baptized and you just need a place to be covered, to grow and develop and to strengthen your walk, let us know that also so you can become an e-member within our context. We are here for you. As we end this experience and we end this year, I want you to know that from the bottom of my heart, that I appreciate every single individual that has made this transition possible. This has not been the year we planned. This has not been the year we expected. You could not have told us that this was going to be the way that the story would be written. But here we are. We're here. I thank God for each and every one of you that is committed to this virtual experience, that is committed to serving in ministry beyond the walls, that is committed themselves to doing all that they can for the kingdom of God. This is not an easy thing. I thank God for what this experience has become. I thank God for every single person that has stepped up to the plate to fulfill their purpose within the worship experience. To the choirs of Claire and Wesley, thank you for your sacrifice. Thank you for your time and for doing what you can during the midst of a pandemic. I thank God for you. I thank God for those that have come to serve even in this space when we've been alive. I thank God for those that have committed to go with us into next year as we continue to try to do our service for the kingdom of God. I thank God for Patrick. I thank God for his commitment to this task. It has developed a brotherhood in this space that is invaluable to me as a pastor and as a leader. Some people get the vision, other people run with the vision. And I thank God for those that have been willing to run and not just get. This is the beginnings of a new thing. But it does not mean that God is not going to bless it. So my prayer is that each and every one will take this year, the lessons of this year, and recognize that we got more work to do. I know it's been a challenge, but we're going to be, if we're not already, better for it. I love each and every one of you. I pray God's richest blessings upon you. And as we enter into a new year, know that the Lord has already ordered our steps and blessed our way. So, may the Lord bless you, keep you, may He cause His face to shine upon you and give you peace. May the Lord bless the work of your hands and the effort of your days. May He bless you from this time forward and forevermore. And the people of God said amen. God bless you, and we will see you in the new year on the first Sunday of January. Be blessed.